Welcome to the AICPA Town Hall Series, your resource for the latest news and updates on pressing issues facing the accounting profession.
Good afternoon and welcome to the AICPA Town Hall. I'm Eric Auskerson, one of your hosts for today, and we greatly appreciate kicking off September with all of you. We also hope that you're all safe with the many national disasters occurring across the country. Today, we're going to be covering, many topics, and it's going to be what we do every couple of weeks. We're going to interpret some timely and critical information. We're going to talk about strategies and capabilities, and this slide here highlights what the town hall is all about. It's all about bringing you the latest information, doing our best to provide you real-time recommendations, and also talking about firm and company strategies. Today, we're going to kick things off with Barry Melanson with a profession and legislative update. Then we're going to, bring Lisa Simpson in, and she's going to give the usual technical update, a lot of information related to the ongoing business relief programs. And then Lisa's going to have a great session with Carl Peterson talking about the MAP survey and top firm issues. And then we're going to close out with a group session on practice strategies. Ed Carl is also going to be joining us to talk about some of the latest tax topics. So with that, I'd like to bring Barry Melanson up to join me. And hi, Barry. And before we get going and start talking about, many of these very timely topics, I think it's also important for us, just when you look here at these two news articles and you look at the one on the right, and it talks about, the top concern for 2021, staffing and COVID-19. And you and I we've spent the last year and a half talking about, business relief and managing COVID. And I think we thought, like many people thought, that we'd be in a different place in September of 2021. But we are where we are, and we do have the Delta variant, and then we've got, on top of all that, we've got these natural disasters. So just some perspective from you. It was exciting being with you in Vegas. We thought we were going to engage, and we're going to start the reopening. And now we're all doing a little bit of a reset and managing through some of these other events.
I think everybody feels like we were in a different spot. I mean, I think in June and July, there was this feeling that we were moving into a different place. Clearly, some of the business relief was wrapping up, so to speak. People were thinking about offices being, staffed in a different way. And of course, some places in the country that is truly happening. But it's almost like we've gone into a circle. It's almost a vortex, and a lot of the COVID implications and the weight of COVID. And I think it's become a weight. I think it's evolved from the standpoint of maybe very early on of fear, and then how do you manage it, and then some expectations of hope. And now it's just like, I can't believe I'm dealing with it again. And again, people have different perspectives on it, but it's causing people, Deloitte article here, changing their view on offices. There's a lot of political emotion as relates to, COVID has become a political divided issue, like a lot of other things. And it has the risk as we move into the fall of affecting business, and it's certainly having an undercurrent in our Washington, D.C. environment.
Yeah, well said, Barry. And I think one thing, we said this back in April of 2020, the trusted advisor, staying calm, being that advisory resource for the businesses, because you do need to reset. You do need to reset a little bit. You do need to make adjustments. So I think it seems like it's been going on for a long time, but let's all catch a breath, stand back and say, okay, we're gonna continue to soldier on, and we're gonna get through this.
And Erica, I think that's a great point, and I agree with it. As you know, the trusted advisor. I would just really encourage all members of the profession to find a way to be that positive attitude in different environments as well. There's so much negativity. And I think as part of being that key advisor, it's not only the calmness, but it's the ability to give people sort of, I don't want to say hope, that's probably a little bit more dire, but I think giving people a way to think about the future and to think about getting through it, and we're going to get through this. Not a lot of places in the society, that doesn't sell news media, and that doesn't sell advertisements, and that doesn't sell political outcomes. So, that voice is important. And I think that trusted role we have is important for us to deliver that. And it's hard. I admit it's hard, but it is something that I think we need to do.
Okay, well, thanks. This is the Power Hour. We got a lot to cover, but I think it was important to kind of, have some high-level context to start things out. So this is what we're going to talk about with the DC updates. It's a little bit of an agenda slide here. Barry's going to kick it off and give us the latest on the infrastructure and reconciliation bills, and then we're going to bring Ed Carl in to talk about a lot of very important tax advocacy items. So Barry, here's the slide on legislative activities. Lauren, part of Mark Peterson's advocacy team, she did a great job earlier in August, giving almost a civics lesson on how all this works. So you now can share the latest.
Yeah, she gave a civics lesson, and I was going to start this off by saying, and to really understand all of this, you got to almost throw out everything you might possibly remember from your civics classes in high school, because how a bill becomes a law is a lot different than the reality in those textbooks. A lot different than the reality of today. Look, I think let's just set it this in a bit. In many of these town halls, we've talked about the news media will always talk about the 50-50 Senate, the vice president breaking the tie, and that the battleground is the Senate. But the reality is the House is almost as close, and the House becomes a very significant part of whether or not something can get through. It's not automatic just because there is a slight Democratic majority in the House. And that played out in this $3.5 trillion budget reconciliation and infrastructure debate. There were 9 moderate Democrats who really put a cog into some of the movement in that process for trying to get some things out of it. And the thing that they most wanted out of that was a vote on the Senate passed infrastructure bill. And there was some obviously backroom activities, but ultimately part of that was the passage of the $3.5 trillion budget package that came from the Senate. And so what we have is some articulating a desire and a belief they can get all of this stuff through by the end of September, which there's a lot of things that expire at the end of September. The reality is that that's going to be awfully hard. And, it's possible. Anything is possible, but the reality is that that's still going to get bogged down, and we can talk about some of those details.
Yeah, Barry, as you said, I mean, we always have deadlines. Congress got a lot of deadlines. When Congress has deadlines, sometimes things get messy. So this slide highlights some of the key events coming up.
Yeah, and in that context of this slide, let's just make a couple of points. Point number one, what the 9 moderate Democrats who got a lot of profile on it was they extracted a commitment to vote on the Senate passed infrastructure bill by the 27th of September. It's not a commitment that all the Democrats in the House will vote for that. So it doesn't mean that it will be passed. And in fact, there are certainly people on the progressive side of the Democratic Party that might in fact vote no because they want different things and more things in that infrastructure package. And so what the moderates sort of got was a notion that they had to vote on the $3.5 trillion budget bill. And yes, they will get a vote likely by September 27th, but there's no guarantee that that's going to pass. And so it doesn't mean it's the end if it doesn't pass, because the House can take it back up and more trading can take place. And that's probably the most likely outcome, even if it doesn't pass on the 27th. And then all these things start to kick in. There's the fiscal 21 funding, there's a budget resolution issue, the National Flood Insurance Program, certainly high profile with the storms that have just occurred. So there's all of these pressures that exist. And then ultimately the third leg to the stool, infrastructure, budget, and then reconciliation being the leg of the stool where really if there are tax changes and things of that nature, it will come through that process. And so it's far from over. It's highly complicated. And, the things that you hear in the media may not actually be how it plays out. And I think a lot of people say, oh, there's going to be a vote on the 27th and it's going to pass. I'm not so confident that it will pass. It could, but it could actually get held up for further negotiations.
And Barry, when you think about what's happening here in September, outside of this, we've got all the elected officials have to focus on their constituencies with these storms, these natural events. You've got some other major political events happening internationally, and then you got the economy and what's happening there. And so, what do you the outside factors related to these deadlines as they focus just on these two bills? But these aren't the only two things that are going on in DC.
Right. I mean, you've got world politics. I mean, to be honest, the White House, the administration situation today, given some of these world events, is different than it was in June and July when we were talking about that. And that goes on both sides of the political spectrum. The debt limit is clearly in place right now, that we've been spending what's called by extraordinary means, by sort of managing the cash flow of the federal government. But that is quickly up. And the House Democrats say they're going to pass it through a continuing resolution, tied it to a continuing resolution of funding the government. Senate Republicans say they're not going to support that. But I do think there's just so many things that are getting people's attention that affects that September 30th or deadline. I think that causes the likelihood of it moving later in the year to a much higher probability.
So Barry, what we're going to do now is what we always try to do is share what should they, you have all of the, kind of timing issues and how it might happen, but what will happen and what will be the impact and what will this mean to the firms and their clients?
Well, I mean, I think clearly the bills, there will be something passed. It's probably not going to be with the numbers that have been communicated. 3.5 trillion as an example. It's probably not going to be, everything that has been talked about from a tax package perspective. And in fact, we don't even have wording on most of this stuff. And so, there will be likely something that happens. There will be, I think, legislation that will clearly focus on healthcare, climate. There will be an awful lot of activities there. And there's, for instance, if you look at the country from a demographic perspective, as opposed to an age demographic perspective, as opposed to a Republican Democrat demographic, there's a lot of support for something in the energy space. And, I think on top of that, there's the possibility, Eric, of additional programs that get funded in the support of the economy. I think we would have said in July, additional funding for the restaurant revitalization program was probably not going to happen. But now I think it's at least a possibility. It's because of the COVID, as you mentioned in the opening comments, the redo of COVID. Maybe we could bring Ed up, but we can talk about some of the aspects on the tax side that again would come through reconciliation. And we'll pick on some of these. And I think we have to start, Ed, with the IRS service issue. It has been with us essentially throughout COVID. So, more than a year and a half now. And we've been very active in that space. And for those of you who don't know, Ed, as our Vice President of Taxation, works with all of our tax committees and volunteers, and then a tremendous amount of time on the Hill and with the IRS and Treasury. Give me your sense. Give us an update, please, on the service issue, and then what we're really pushing for from relief.
Yeah, of course. A few minutes ago, Barry, you mentioned the weight of COVID and talking about, not anticipating where we would be. And I think that weight has really manifested itself in the frankly tanked service levels at IRS. And we hear from our members every day. It impacts them greatly, and it really consumes a lot of the work that we do. And so what we're trying to do is minimize the need that our members have to do anything with IRS, minimize the touches, the calls, the mails with IRS, so that IRS can start to catch up and try to clean up a mess that there is out there.
Ed, I got a call about 3 weeks ago from a sole practitioner, or a very small firm. It might be a 2-partner firm. And he said, I got up real early. I put it on my list to call the IRS. I had this client problem. I was prepared to sit on the phone for a long time. And he said, I felt like I had won the lottery. I actually got my call answered. And the IRS agent actually helped me solve a particular problem. He says it was like the first time I'd had that in months and months and months. And so I think it's really throughout. It's a weight. It's part of that COVID weight, but we also have this service level weight. And we've been pushing legislation, Ed, to sort of force the hand on penalty relief. And we've actually had some progress on that just recently.
Right, we are moving. So we do have a regulatory front and, as you said, a legislative front on this. And we anticipate tomorrow that Congresswoman Judy Chu, who's a Democrat from California, will introduce a bill that would reduce certain estimated tax and late payment penalties. Again, the idea is to mitigate, to minimize the need to touch the IRS. If you can eliminate some of the penalty notices that really aren't necessary, then that will help dissipate some of the pressure.
And take some of the pressure off from the clients or the companies you work for, because they're obviously, people feel a need to be responsive to certain notices. And then we create this sort of never-ending back and forth from the mail with things not being processed and even checks not being cashed, et cetera. And so it's sort of one of those key things. It doesn't solve all of the problems, I think you would agree, but it helps to alleviate this incredible pent-up frustration that exists.
There is a pent-up frustration. It's one of the reasons that we're engaging in a social media campaign that our members can participate in. Maybe that'll help feel that in a small way they're participating now. This will be next week, and we know it's a busy period leading up to September 15th, and frankly, the 7th and 8th next week are holidays, so people can participate before or after as well, whatever suits their schedule. But we're leading up to, you talked about reconciliation. There's going to be House Ways and Means markup starting on the 9th and 10th, and then the following week as well. So this social media campaign will give our members a small opportunity to participate in some of the solution to this problem.
And don't forget our members' clients. Sorry, Eric. Our members' clients also, you can have them participate in it. And I think that Ways and Means Committee, I just want to emphasize it, this elevates the need for the IRS to address this and for Congress to help us make the IRS aware that they need to address this. And that's really the substance of this. Eric, you were going to say something.
Yeah, I just say, well, Ed has said this, and Mark Peterson has said this. This has really helped. I don't know if it's raised awareness or just increased the intensity on the penalty relief issues. And we've got a lot of guidance on how to do that. You can always just send an email, call your elected official. There's information on how to find your rep. So this has made an impact before, and I know the town hall attendees appreciate it when we ask them as a collective group here.
Right.
One other thing, Barry, we stay on the social, but there are some questions coming in, and it's always good to let you know what the live questions are. And we're going to get to this, but a lot of live questions on how to treat forgiveness.
Let's go to that. Let's go to that.
I think we were ready for that, Barry.
We were ready
for it. That the question's coming in.
So we're back to that slide we had before, and I'm going to bring Ed up. And if you see, we covered the first item on the left. We're going to cover the bottom left, the PPP basis issue and forgiveness. And we have been at town hall after town hall. We've been telling you guidance is coming. Guidance is coming, because that's what the IRS was telling us. Well, here we are in the beginning of September, and all of these returns have a September 15th date. And Ed, I want you to give us an update, but here's the substance of this frustration, this weight. We have practitioners, companies that have to meet September 15th. There is no guidance on how to handle this. And the message we're delivering is, look, without the guidance, people have to file something, and they're going to make a guess at it. And then if you come out with guidance that's contrary to that, and it will be from some of them, that just sort of creates this new weight with all of these amended returns and backlogs. That it feeds the backlog issue. That it's just, so back in our management classes, when we thought about critical path, we're this process is ignoring the critical path here and exacerbating the whole problem. And it's frustrating for us because we want to give you answers, but there's not answers. So Ed,
Yeah,
what's the status here?
we've brought that up with Treasury and Chief Counsel's office and IRS, and you know, you were referring to the idea of trying to minimize the touches with IRS, and now our members may be forced into the situation of having to amend returns for their clients, and that's not where you want to be, but may have to be. So we've been discussing this with IRS. We brought up the September 15th issue. It's a horrible place for our members to be. But I think the critical place right now is to talk to your clients. You have to let them know what the status is. You have to let them know that it is not your issue that you've created. It's a government issue, that you're waiting for the proper guidance, that you may have to file returns with the best information you have by September 15th in consultation with your clients, because it's your clients' returns. And that based on the information you put in those returns, if guidance comes out differently, then you may have to amend those returns. And there is a link on this page, it'll be in your resources, to a great podcast that our tax section did on what do you do, how do you file a return when you don't have all the information, and what are the follow-up steps, and what happens if the guidance is different. It's a good podcast to listen to.
And Ed, just to let people know, that link, you have to download the presentation, and that's a clickable link to the podcast. Barry?
So let's just hit a couple other items, and then we'll move on to some of the other topics, Ed, but it's sort of almost in a rapid fire notion. I talked about the three legs to the stool, you know, the infrastructure, the budget, the reconciliation, where tax issues will come in. And so as soon as we get past September 15th, some of these pass-through entity issues, then this interaction with the company you work for, your clients, is going to be, well, what should I be doing? Because we know something is going to pass from a tax perspective. So let's just talk about that. Corporate tax rate. Give us a sense on what we think happens there.
Well, it's at 21%. There have been notion that it will go up to 28%. The likelihood of it going up to 28 is not great, but the likelihood of it increasing maybe to 25, maybe 26, there's a strong possibility of that.
You'll probably hear 25. It may get compromised at 26 as they try to make the pay-fors work and all of this stuff. I agree with Ed. Let's talk about capital gains, a big planning issue, no question about that. And the whole notion of capital gains in general, rate, and then on the other side of the coin, where we have transfers of property, step-up basis issue.
Right. So talking about the capital gains being taxed, so it would likely be for a high net worth individual. They've been talking about $1 million AGI. That could all be compromised, but there's a strong possibility that capital gains at that $1 million AGI level could be taxed as at the regular marginal rate for that individual.
And the further it goes, the further we don't have language, the less likely retroactivity comes into play. They could always do something with retroactivity, highly unlikely to go way back into the year at this point.
Right. Yeah, I agree with that.
And then the stepped up basis issue, there's a lot of moderate Democrats pushing back on the elimination of stepped up basis. That looks less and less likely.
It's looking less and less likely, but I'm starting to hear about a lot of estate planners who are talking about adapting to some of that by making transfers in trust and trying to avoid some of those situations. We know the estate tax exemption level will automatically drop down at the end of 2025. That was part of the tax reform rules. So there's a lot of uncertainty in this area, but 2021 might be the safest period to do some planning in this area.
And what we're going to do, and Eric is going to make sure this happens, we're going to bring a practitioner or two that's dealing with this planning process on in a subsequent town hall, just like we've done on a lot of these other topics, because I think Ed's point on this is right on, that this is probably one of the top planning areas with your clients and however you service clients in that space. Ed, two quick last points. SALT, that probably remains in play, but not at a full repeal. give us your thoughts there.
Right. The cost of a full repeal is too high, and with all of the policy implications that the Democrats have talked about implementing, it's going to be a challenge. There's no doubt that a lot of the East and West Coast legislators are going to keep this high profile to talk about. What we come up with would almost certainly not be full repeal. It's a good likelihood nothing will happen, but it's possible they could have a partial reinstatement,
partial
increase
with some cap, a different cap, maybe some AGI tax, etc. And the last point, disaster legislation. This is something we've been after for a long time. The number of disasters, Eric talked about it at the beginning, is just incredible. There needs to be some more automatic aspects. Obviously, the IRS acted really quickly with Hurricane Ida, but there just needs to be some automatic elements that kick in, is our position, and we've supported legislation for that. And frankly, there's a lot more attention on that right now.
Right, there is. I mean, my son sent me pictures from New Jersey of the river near his home getting too close to his home. But when you talk about Hurricane Ida in Louisiana, Governor Edwards in Louisiana issued a state of emergency Thursday, August 26th. The IRS, very quickly, frankly, issued a notice on Tuesday of this week, August 31st. So that was pretty quick. But the legislation that we've been promoting would allow the IRS the authority to make that declaration the same time that the governor issued his emergency proclamation. So five days earlier, and a lot of less stress for CPAs who are worried about how they do tax returns and make payments or help their clients make payments, et cetera.
Yeah, and we have a lot of examples that haven't been this quick. So that was a quick one. There's been a lot of examples that's not. So Eric, a lot of things happening in tax. We could take, this hour and many, many more hours on it, but we wanted to hit the high level of some of the things to be thinking about. And obviously, express, we understand the frustration in working on the service levels and the guidance on the PPP basis issue.
Well, I can tell you this, there's been a lot of positive comments coming in. Ed, people definitely appreciate the work that you're doing, the Big Five initiatives here. One thing, people, follow Ed on Twitter. He always will post the latest podcasts or things like that, and you've got all of our Twitter handles on the presentation slide. So Barry, Ed, we're going to bring you back for the practice strategies in open forum. So look forward to having you rejoin us shortly. So with that, Lisa Simpson, here it is. It's September 2021, and we've got, guess what? We got some business relief to talk about.
We do. Not a lot of new developments, but I just want to keep you guys in the loop on some of the things that are happening and just the intel that we're hearing from the people that we're engaging with. So if we start with PPP, these are the statistics as of August 15, so they're a little dated, but I think the key is we've still got almost 15% of 2020 loans that haven't yet applied for forgiveness. So that's about 804,000 loans. I was talking to lenders today and, letting them know, reminding them that we still need some guidance on PPP and ERC interplay. We're working on that. And also that you guys are a little busy with tax returns. So we expect that we'll see a lot of pickup between October 15 and the end of the year. But your clients, if they took those 2020 loans, their payments might be coming due. A lot of lenders set those up to automatically draft. So they may be getting some notifications about payments being due if they haven't applied for forgiveness. Reminder, it's really important to get the forgiveness application right. So take your time on that and prioritize those 2020 loans because you'll have time in 2021 or 2022 to work on those loans that don't have payments due yet.
At least I think we're going to begin to hear about maybe a 5% class that maybe the business has dissolved. So this is going to be another matter that the lenders and the SBA, potentially with some firm support, are going to have to unpack. Because there's probably going to be a long tail a small set of businesses that do not, for reasons that they're not in business anymore, don't apply for forgiveness.
And you're not required to file for forgiveness. You've got time. If you choose not to, you can pay the loan over the term. So you have options there, but we do expect that most will be filing for forgiveness unless, like Eric said, they've gone out of business. Lots of new data, but the highlight here are the circles, and that's showing that we're averaging about a 99% full forgiveness rate. So only a small amount is not being granted forgiveness. Then I wanted to give you guys an update on the direct forgiveness portal in case your clients are being contacted by the SBA or by their lender. There's about 1,300 lenders out of the 5,500 who participated in PPP who are opted into that direct forgiveness portal. So your client or you as a borrower might have gotten an invitation to that portal. As a reminder, it's for loans of $150,000 or less. It seems to be going well from all reports. About 670,000 borrowers have submitted their applications for forgiveness. And the news that we're hearing is that the decisions are being made by the SBA very quickly. So generally, they're turning around within a week and they're submitting their decision, their recommendation back to the lender on how much of the loan to forgive. Then the lender says yes or no, notifies the borrower of the forgiveness amount, and then the SBA pays the bank back for the loans. So you've got a link there in your resources that you download to the participating lenders. We got a question about whether or not like Bank of America is opting into this program. The larger lenders are generally not going to be opting into that because they had already invested in their portals, their processes around managing forgiveness. So a lot of the lenders that you're going to see on that list are community banking institutions or maybe some fintechs who hadn't built out their forgiveness operations just yet.
And Lisa, a quick comment here. I think there's not a right or wrong path here. Some of the national banks, they've got lending forgiveness portals that they've set up. There is a little bit of double work, potentially leveraging the direct SBA platform for the lender. So I think in some cases, lenders are saying we're going to use the SBA forgiveness portal. In other cases, the lender is not. The key thing is just to understand which path that they're taking. Tell your client, if they've got the direct portal, great, you can leverage it. If the bank's got their own portal, that's going to work just fine as well.
Yeah, and what's also working well from what we hear is that COVID impact score. So as a reminder, for loans of $150,000 or less, you didn't have to submit proof of your revenue reduction when you got your loan. And so the SBA has contracted with an outside vendor to create this COVID impact score that kind of bypasses that need to support the revenue decline. All right, quick update on SVOG. We got new numbers from them through August 30th. You can see that there is still plenty of money left in that program. One quick note, our team is working next week to get you an accounting for SVOG and RRF video, similar to what we've done for a couple of the accounting models for PPP. So keep an eye out for those, and I'm sure we'll post them on social media once we get those live. But again, to the point that there's money left in SVOG, on the next slide, Eric, we've got a link to a story that the Journal of Accountancy did where the SBA has announced that they're going to open their supplemental grant program. So for those entities who have revenue reductions of 70% or more, they're eligible for an add-on to their SVOG grant of up to 50%. The emails should have started going out. Today's the 2nd, so they should have started going out on the 27th of August. And it does extend the amount of time that the grantee has to expend those funds. So RRF, we talked about, Barry talked about prospects of replenishing that fund, it's up in the air, but I know we continue to get a lot of people interested in knowing what's going on with RRF. So we'll keep you posted on that. ERC, still getting lots of questions in the Q&A about the IRS notices that came out a couple of weeks ago. So I just wanted to remind you that we've got the podcast and the video where Chris Esposito and April Walker are on our tax teams, walk through that new guidance, especially the part about owner wages of 50% or more shareholders. So you've got those resources to turn to. We also released some frequently asked questions, so you can just click on that link, and a lot of the common questions that we're getting will be answered directly there.
And one thing, we try to highlight a lot of this in the town hall newsletters. It's almost, Lisa, it's back to school. There's lots of resources for people to leverage as they continue to navigate the end to these business relief programs. So with that, I'm going to step down for a little bit and let you and Carl review this great data from PCPS.
See you in a few minutes, Eric. Welcome, Carl. Thanks for joining us again.
Hey, Lisa. Thanks for having me.
I'm excited to talk about the CPA firm top issues. So as you guys know, we asked you to rank kind of what are the top challenges? What's keeping you up at night as a firm owner? So what Carl and I are going to do quickly today is review the results of the survey, and then we'll bring Eric and Barry back to kind of talk about how to approach some of these challenges that are keeping you guys up at night. We want to try to help with that. So what we've done, we had about 750 firms of all sizes respond to our survey and rank their challenges. So when you look at the chart, it's different than what I showed you, the other eye chart that I showed you a few weeks ago. On this one, we've just tried to show you the commonalities of the top challenges. So Carl, as you take a look at that, what do you see that dropped off from the last time we asked this question in 2019?
Yeah, I think it's interesting to me that there's two issues that really dropped off the list that I think are still top issues today. One was the cybersecurity risk and exposure of client data. That had been a top issue, a top 5 issue in recent years, and as you know, didn't really go away. And still in the top 10. And I keep track of the history of the survey going back to 2009. But I think in many respects, cybersecurity and exposure of client data breaches is even a bigger issue in a remote environment.
Absolutely.
Right? Greater risk and exposure today.
Yeah, Carl and I were in the Professional Liability Insurance Committee meeting last week, working with our partners at Aon, and ransomware, malware, cybersecurity risks are very high on their risk scan. So we do certainly know that's still a top issue.
Yeah, and I know you hear that from firms as well. When you talk to firms, what they're worried about and all the risks that's out there. The second thing that dropped off, I think, is interesting is developing and executing a succession plan. I'm not sure what you've been hearing, but I'll tell you that with the number of small firms that I've actually met with these past few months or even just few weeks that are now seriously considering merging and working on their succession plan or merging up, you would think it would be the number one issue today. And maybe it would be for some firms if the survey was taken today. So I was surprised at that, but that's another issue that's dropped off.
And that's a great point. Just as a point of reference, we did field this survey right after May 17 for about 3 or 4 weeks. So it would be interesting to see what you guys, how you would rank these choices right now.
Yeah.
So from a succession planning standpoint, we did have investing in leadership and developing that next generation of leadership. So hopefully they are still thinking about succession planning and building out that leadership pipeline.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think firms are actually a little bit worried right now about that pipeline. All of a sudden, you've had a number of firms lose some, rock stars, some key players, young professionals in their firms, and we're talking about firms of all sizes, not just the small firms. There's G400 firms that have lost some key young professionals that they had their eye on to maybe be running that firm in the future, and I think they're very worried about it. So for the smaller firm, of course, that raises the issue of succession to be even a higher priority. And again, I've heard so much about it in the last few weeks that it is suddenly a number one issue.
And on that succession planning point, it's a great topic, Carl. We probably need to come back and do a deeper dive on succession and an M&A strategy, because the landscape is changing, and larger firms are looking at their merger candidates much more strategically. So they're looking for a particular niche, or they're looking for a particular geography, but they really want talent. They're looking for who do you have in your firm that's going to do the work that I can bring you. So,
oh my gosh, you're absolutely right. Just last week, I met with a firm, and their numbers are fantastic. The realization rate is fantastic, probably maybe the highest in their geographic area. And when feelers have been put out to other firms about merging up, they're so excited about it, and then they find out they don't have the staff, the pipeline, the young people to bring over. The interest drops. So
that's a great lead into our next topic. So we also asked the question of, what do you think is going to have the most impact over the next 5 years? And again, no surprise, the things that Carl and I were just talking about, staffing is expected to have the biggest impact for regardless of the firm size. I'm interested in the one about adapting to changing client needs. And we'll bring Eric and Barry up to talk about that. But as we look at just what are the key takeaways, Carl, what do you think the key takeaways are?
Well, I can tell you the key takeaways are really related to staffing, right? It's all about the talent, as shown in this particular slide. Some of the things that were not necessarily identified in the top 5 all relates to staffing, right? Developing that next generation of leadership that you just mentioned. It was number 2 for, the medium-sized firms, but it wasn't on the top 5 for everybody else. What about managing a remote workforce? What about the employees' mental health and well-being, which I think had a direct impact on these people leaving practice today? So talent is the key takeaway, that while we have all these issues where everybody's dealing with the IRS and everybody's frustrated with that, and you have the COVID relief programs, but I think everybody's like just kind of plowing through that right now, just dealing with it on a day-to-day basis. But as everybody's kind of resetting, like Eric mentioned at the beginning, firms are resetting and looking at, okay, what are we going to do for 2022? And I think it all relates to talent.
Yeah, I'm going to follow up on your point on mental health and wellness. Carl, a couple of weeks ago, we hosted about 85 emerging leaders in firms in that top 100 space. So people that have a lot of support. We did a session on mental health, and they came back and said that is the most important topic that you covered in our entire 3 days of leadership development training. So it is top of mind and very important. You'll find a lot of JFA articles about that, and the PCPS team is actively working on some resources to help smaller firms deal with mental health conversations, because I know it can be a challenge.
Yeah.
So with that, how about we bring up Eric and Barry and dig into, so now what? How do we deal with these talent challenges? What's going to separate a firm and allow them to continue to grow and succeed? In the conversations I've been having with firms, they're really looking at what are the main levers that they can push in that recruiting, retaining, and developing talent space. Eric, Barry, preliminary thoughts?
Well, it's always dangerous to try to answer these questions, because anyone listening will say, yeah, but my situation is unique, or you don't understand. And I think we try to, we never would understand every individual circumstance, but we do work really hard at trying to understand all the different aspects of the profession. And I would say that the recruiting side is really looking at how do you present to that young person. This next generation is willing to work hard, but they're going to work different. And I would make 2 points here. One, the fight for talent is not a challenge just for our profession. It is a much bigger picture issue. It is a societal issue. And you don't have to listen to too much news to see that. And so, there's a lot of things that we're doing with the state societies and others to feed the pipeline, but ultimately the attractiveness to a particular firm inside the profession has a lot to do with how you present yourself. What's your technology look like? What's your business model look like? In today's world, what is your work theories as far as, work from home and different types of advancement opportunities? And frankly, I think CEOs of firms make a big mistake when they do not early in a young person's career talk about what life is like in the firm, what life is like as a partner in the firm, and what that progression is. I think firms tend to be afraid to talk about that because they don't want to sound like they're making a commitment. But without painting that picture, it's really easy for a person to become dissatisfied, and sort of the lack of knowledge is there. So that's a really key issue. And this generation is going to pick firm A over B based on a technology view to a large degree, and that's an important part. Then the second part is, I would say, and Eric will probably pick at this a little bit from his own perspective, but it's really about your business model, because you have to be able to compensate in a different way. And I think firms don't want to hear that, but what we're seeing is on the college campuses, other business majors, entry-level pay is exceeding accounting graduates' entry-level pay. So if a marketing major or a management major is seeing, and I'm not talking about high tech or anything, I'm talking about marketing and management type of degrees that we would have as CPAs and accounting majors thought of as somewhat generic, are generating higher starting level pay. Now, we have to reinforce that career earnings is greater in our profession, and we're working on that. But there is an element of the starting level pay in this profession that's going to have to be addressed, I think. And the only way it can be is to address business models. What is the service level to my clients? What are the fee recognition from that? Carl talked about gross margins and the like. Those things have to be addressed. And by the way, if your client gave you that problem, that's what you would tell them. We have to look at your business model and your competitive environment and where you create value and where you can maximize the type of profitability you have. So I would throw those two out. Eric may have a different take.
Yeah, that's a good summary. And what I would just say, we talked about the three legs of the stool regarding legislation. I look at this slide, three legs of the stool, because you need to think about recruitment and how you're doing that. In some cases, you want to do remote for some positions. You don't want to do remote for others. So be intentional about that. And then retention is just as important as recruiting, because every time you lose somebody, you got to recruit someone else. And I'm hearing this from our ecosystem partners, from companies, and you need to look at compensation levels for the people you have, just like the new packages that you're putting out there. And then, as Lisa just mentioned, development and, having that right focus investment on the employee. So I think this is important, and there's not one size fits all. And you need to think about both your new employees, your existing employees, and how you're gonna support both of them with onboarding and development. And Barry, you at the business model, we can jump into that, but maybe let Carl and Lisa add a little bit to what we just said.
Carl, what about the diversity aspect of hiring? Are you talking with smaller firms about how to recruit differently?
I think their eyes are opening, that the pipeline and the opportunities, if they expand their vision and openness, that there are, young professionals out there that they can tap into that would be interested. Going into a small firm is a lifestyle choice. And so I think there are opportunities that people that you can, get in front of that we're going to make a difference. And when Barry talked about the business model, maybe we're going to go into it in a second, but we're going to run out of time too. I think about that, but what a better time than right now to start changing that business model. I mean, we've gone through the last year and a half. Clients want you to do advisory services. They want you to provide, greater services and consulting than we ever have. And I'll if I can make one more quick comment, CPA.com last year did a survey, and I've mentioned this before in other presentations I've done. And one of the best questions they asked was to non-CPA firms, to their clients, if money were no object, what would you want from your CPA firm? And the number one thing was advisory. We want them to participate and help us and guide us at the executive level. What an opportunity we're in today.
Yeah, that's true. I was just talking to a CPA who became a CEO, and we were talking about that very issue, Carl. And he said, I actually had a frustration with my firm because I wanted to do some things and I ended up going to somebody else because they just didn't step up in that process. But I would just say on the recruiting point and the diversity, Lisa, which is a great point, it's critical. There are very significant numbers of minority students majored in accounting that do not get recruited into public accounting firms. Now, we want more. We want that pipeline to be more diverse and to have more. But there's still, you have to think about, Eric talks about thinking strategically, where are you recruiting? What we're seeing in the larger firms is some of the sort of criteria that they've said, you've got to be over these 3, points, grade point average and other things to even consider you. That's being reduced. And that just means larger firms are going to come down to maybe where smaller firms have gotten into for people. And I think it's important for smaller firms, therefore, to think about, are you recruiting at that historically Black college and university? And can you, really find people who are going to just be enamored with being successful in a small business, small firm entrepreneurial environment? But you might have to change where you go and how you look at it from that standpoint.
I'm going to give a plug to community colleges because I was active in the local chapter of the State Society here, and we would have a scholarship night. The students from the local community colleges were so driven, so hardworking, and they could easily be taken into a firm and shepherded through the process of transferring to a 4-year college to get their accounting degree. So a lot of great opportunities there.
Our current chair of the AICPA, Bill Paroli, started his academic career in a community college, and a partner of his in a small firm where he created the same story. So great point, Lisa.
I'm hoping Bill's listening, so that's why I had to throw that in.
There you go. If I could point out that I've had also, that concept of going to community colleges is not limited by firm size. I've had sole proprietors tell me that is where they go for interns when they want them or when they're looking for somebody. And there's also a medium-sized firm out of California that has talked to me about specifically their initiatives in going into the local community colleges for talent. So,
Eric, do you want to comment maybe on some of the business model points? I had a chance to talk about those. Maybe you want to add on to some of those.
Well, I mean, I'm also looking at the questions too, Barry, so but I will say on the business, everyone said it well, and I think. Well, what we're seeing here is that even with this reset here that's occurring in the extension of some of these remote environments, it is just, investing in the digital, supporting, some of these very important must-have business lines like client accounting services, and thinking about how you're going to do it. It's not just the leverage technology, it's all about practice strategy. So just to round out here, here's a question that's coming in. Related to our data on starting salary for accounting grads. So Barry, or Lisa, you kind of brought it up a little bit on the different salary points that the grads are looking at. What's our latest data?
We'll have the results of our 2021 MAP survey that I've asked you guys to participate in. The numbers are roughly around 45 to 47,000 starting salary on average. So true story, my son graduated from college a few years ago with a marketing degree, and he started out making more than that.
And that obviously is different based on geography and all of those other things. But it's hard to say it from that standpoint in a single, even a small range of numbers. I would say the other part on this, though, is the reality was, and I know people don't want to hear this, we went through about 3 or 4 years where supply exceeded demand from a public accounting perspective. And our supply and demand survey showed that there was a 31% decline of hire over the 2 years prior to COVID of hiring accounting graduates into public practice, 31% over 2 years. When you have excess supply over demand, salaries stagnate. And that's really what happened in the marketplace. Now, today you would say, how could that be? But that was the data point. And I'll just add to that, there is going to be a survey out in the field, which is our supply and demand study. And it's a sample for firms as to what their hiring is and what their experience is. And if your firm is selected, we would just strongly encourage you to fill that out, because we also survey it on the university side, i.e. supply and demand. And we would encourage you to participate in that.
And Barry, the only thing I'll say is the data. Data here sometimes is rear view mirror data, and I think we're all seeing data that there's college grads being hired at $100,000 a year. So that, at least maybe in some parts of the country, we'll see. It seems that is changing a lot. So that's just something that I think, Barry, and you kind of alluded to that with the points. There's a lot of feedback just even on the 45 to 50. I think there's without a doubt there's college grads starting at 75 to 90.
Yeah, it depends on the university. It's very difficult. The market has a huge element in that space.
Absolutely.
There is not a national number there.
That's right. So know your local area, and so we're now going to bring Ed Carl back up. We can kind of go to the 5 squares here. We can drop the presentation. This has been a power hour, so we've got lots of questions coming in. Is there something that one of us just want to share in a lightning round here related to Ed? Did maybe something we missed in the tax topics, or Carl? Sometimes we call you Carl's Corner. Any other advice that you have for firms? So maybe Ed, start with you if you've had a chance to see some of the questions.
Well, I haven't seen the questions, but we get calls from members every day. I'll even put this one on the table because it's sort of the elephant in the room. We're already getting questions about whether September 15th or October 15th will change. We know our members are struggling, and that's just not going to happen. For every member who calls and asks us to change those dates, we get another couple who say, please don't change those dates. And so we understand the frustration and the challenges. It's those other things that we talked about earlier, trying to lessen the pressure with IRS that we hope will help somewhat. We know it's a challenging time.
And to one point, just because we talked about so much in Washington and how it's unpredictable and September is going to be crazy, Senator Manchin just published in the Wall Street Journal saying, I will not support a $3.5 trillion bill anywhere near that level of additional spending without greater clarity about why Congress chooses to ignore the serious effects of inflation and debt have on existing government programs. And he also raised concerns about the pandemic trajectory. And remember, one Democrat in the Senate is a very large number.
Maybe I could give a final positive comment about small firm practice. I was with a group a couple of weeks ago, small firms, talking about how the season went. And one individual, Harold from Michigan, said, not one person in our firm worked more than 40 hours a week during tax season. And we didn't talk about this much today, but it's all about, managing client expectations. And that's exactly what they did from day one of the tax season. When somebody brought their data in, they said, when can I have it? They said, it won't be ready. We're going to extend. They did that with almost everybody, or at least gave them the expectation that it was not going to be done tomorrow. And so it can be done. And Harold's been around a long time.
Yeah, I know some firms that are in the audit space as well that just manage themselves to say, we're going to get certain realization on certain clients, and we're not going to work the overtime hours. And they right size themselves on that basis, and they do their business model on that basis. And that's what we're talking about with business models. You make those choices. And that's been talked about in management of accounting practice circles for a long time. But we're seeing people, experience it. And I close with this. Different types of pricing models are being experimented with as well. We've talked about it in earlier town halls. Subscription pricing, different types of pricing with clients, eliminating the fear of calling, but therefore increasing the odds of additional services. Those types of things that people are really, really looking at very hard.
Well, we can all stay up here as we kind of close out. Lisa and I close out these same slides, so keep everyone up, Carmine, and just bring the slides back up. So thanks for the discussion today. It was a great town hall. This is the recent town hall series. Plenty of archives for you to leverage, refresh yourself on something or something you may have missed. We've got the PCPS Resource Center, just as Lisa highlighted, continuing to add more and more resources. We've got a great digital CPA free webcast coming up with Tom Peters, one of the leading business strategists of our time. And he's talking about how important just human leadership is. We talk about it's the age of the machines, but it's the age of human leadership. And he's got some great insights that he'll be sharing on that. Just with our schedule here, the next one, due to the September 15th deadline, we know there's a lot happening. So our next town hall is September 30th. We always will do a special recorded session. If there's something that we need to get to you, we'll do a recorded session. We'll highlight it in our town hall newsletter. But this is the upcoming schedule. So Lisa, anything you want to add to the resources? Then I might give Barry final sign off here.
I think you covered it.
So I would just say, Barry, right now we got Labor Day coming up, and so a little bit of tee up. This group here has been working hard, and there's been a lot of others working hard in America as well. So this holiday has some meaning.
Yeah, it's sort of the end of summer, right? It's sort of the notion of celebrating the labor. We've talked about human capital. I think we all need to pay tribute to that. And obviously the mental health point, I think Lisa covered that very well. And that all ties into this. And you said we'd do a special recording. I guess one of those would qualify if we get some guidance on the basis for the September 15th filing. We'll push that out to you really quick.
Yeah, so stay with us on social media. Thanks, everybody. Have a great Labor Day.
Thank you for your participation. You can now subscribe to the AICPA Town Hall series on your favorite podcast platform, as well as watch archives on YouTube and AICPA TV. Tune in for live broadcasts Thursdays at 3 p.m. Eastern Time.